Please be seated. This is the first day of Advent, the first day of the new year for the church. Every year, Advent reminds us that as Christians, we are different from the secular world. Now, everyone else is focused on celebrating the end of the year and getting all that Christmas shopping done. But we Christians are focused on the beginning of our faith that is manifested in the birth of Jesus. In Advent, we wait as we hold our breath for the miracle of the Incarnation. But if this is true, why does the gospel focus on the end of the world, on the signs of the apocalypse? The world-renowned expert in leadership and organizational development, Stephen Covey, wrote the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the second habit is begin with the end in mind. Well, we begin Advent with the end in mind. Jesus gives us visions of the apocalypse and the power of God. He said there will be signs in the sun and on the moon and in the stars, and on earth the nations will be confused and frightened by the terrible noise of the sea and the waves. People will faint in fear at the thought of what's going to happen to the world, for even the heavenly forces will be shaken. Today we are surrounded by many of these signs in the world and here in the United States. New buds on crops cannot form because of drought. The crops that do form are destroyed by floods. Fires ravage forests and orchards. The hillsides and rainforests are cleared to build houses and office buildings. Climate change and global warming are real. And there are other things that worry us. Political divisions, the pandemic, violence in the neighborhoods, wars, unemployment, etc., etc., etc. It seems endless. And all of these situations force people to leave their homes for safety, food, employment. Around the world, there are 258 million migrants who live in a country outside of the country of their birth. And according to the United Nations Refugee Agency, and this is numbers as of November 10th this year, there are 84 million forcibly displaced people worldwide. They're still moving around. And that number continues to grow. This is not just a Western Hemisphere problem, it's a global problem. The devastation is enough to take our breath away. And as Jesus said, the people will faint from fear and foreboding of what is coming upon the world, for the powers of heavens will be shaken. And I'm sure all of us can really relate to that statement these days. But we also need to remember what Jesus said immediately after this prophecy. He said, "Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory." Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud in power and great glory. Here, this is where the end is in mind. The Son of Man, who is God incarnate, comes with power and glory. And despite all these climatic and political and natural disasters, the kingdom of God is near and is present. Jesus continued to speak of the fig tree and other trees. Why? What's the deal with that? Well, let's take a moment and consider the cycle of nature. The harvest does not appear instantly. The fruits of the previous harvest produce the seed. But nothing happens with the seed if it is not planted. It must be planted in the ground where it will die to transform into a plant that gives fruit. As it says in the Gospel of John, "Truly I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. And if it dies, it bears much fruit." As Jesus said, so also when you see these things taking place, you know that the kingdom of God is near. The kingdom of God is already near. The kingdom of God is already here, right here. Do you remember what Father Ben said last Sunday about the kingdom of God? Okay, this is a test. Mike remembers, Paula's nodding her head. Let's see if their memory matches mine. He said that the kingdom of God is different than the kingdom of the world. Mike says, yeah, he got it. And the rule of God's kingdom is love. And love is the center of our faith. There's a prayer in the rite of baptism that speaks of love. I'd like to repeat a few of those phrases. Open our hearts to your grace and truth. Fill us with your life-giving spirit. Teach us to love others in the power of the Spirit. Send us to the world as witnesses of your love. Remember that Jesus often said, the kingdom of God has come near to you. He spoke of the kingdom of God many times. In fact, this phrase is found 32 times in the Gospel of Luke, which is the gospel of our year C, which we just begin today. That is to say, when these signs are happening, we can remember that Jesus will come. We can remember that Jesus is with us during all the disasters of the world and in all the disasters of our lives. The kingdom of God enlivens us with love. And God's love gives us strength to survive the disasters and traumas. Jesus, the Son of humanity and divinity, will come. So in our anticipation of the Nativity, We need to remember the reason for God's incarnation. We need to take heart, raise our heads, because our redemption is coming. The Son of God will come. The kingdom of God is at hand. Jesus will come. Thanks be to God.